Hey everyone, what's up? It's Kat here, your new favorite ginger bibliophile, and then we've got another story from Tales of 1001 Nights, or as some people know it, Arabian Nights, and it's the last story in the Fisherman and the Genie series. So hopefully this one comes out really good. We might even get a puppy. I've got a little man creeping on me. Yes, he's my little man. Mwah! Franny thought about it and then realized she was too big and wanted a foot bath and a nap. So we'll get on with it, and this one will be the Tale of the Enchanted King. So hopefully this one turns out pretty good. I have no idea. So, know that my father was the king of an illustrious city which once flourished around this palace. His name was Mahmud, and he was lord of the Black Islands, which are now 4 mountains. He reigned for 70 years, and on his death, I succeeded him to the throne of his kingdom. I took in marriage my cousin, the daughter of my uncle, who loved me so passionately that she could not bear to part from me, even for a moment. Creepy, but that's royalty. Keep it in line. I lived happily with her for 5 years. It chanced one day, however, that my wife left the palace to visit the baths and was absent so long that I grew anxious for her safety. But I strove to dismiss these fears from my mind, and, entering my chamber, lay down to sleep upon my couch, bidding 2 of my slave girls to fan me. One sat at my head and the other at my feet, and as I lay with my eyes closed, I heard one say to the other, "How unfortunate is the young king, our master, Musada, and how pitiful it is that he should have married our mistress, that shameless woman, that black-souled," something that I shouldn't say. "Allah's curse upon all adulteresses," replied the other. "This harlot who revels away her nights in the beds of thieves and cutthroats is 1,000-fold too vile to be the wife of our master." "And yet he must be blind not to see it," said the first slave. "But how should he suspect her," returned the other, "when every night she mixes in his cup a potent drug which so benumbs his senses that he sleeps like the dead till morning? How can he know what she does and where she goes after he has gone to sleep? She dresses and goes out of the palace. She returns at daybreak and wakes her husband by the fume of aromatic incense." Well, that's a little sneaky. She might be a sorceress. When I heard these words, the world darkened before my eyes, and I was dazed with horror. At dusk, my wife returned to the palace, and we sat for an hour eating and drinking together, as was our custom every evening. At length, I asked for the final cup, which I drank every night before retiring. When she handed it to me, I lifted the cup to my lips, but instead of drinking, poured it hastily into the folds of my garments. Ugh. Then I lay down on my bed and pretended to fall asleep. Presently I heard her say, "Sleep, and may you never wake again. Oh, how I abhor you. My soul sickens at the sight of you." After this she dressed, perfumed herself, girt on my sword, and left the palace. At once I rose and followed her. She stealthily threaded her way through the streets of the town, and, reaching the city gates, mumbled a magic charm. Suddenly the heavy locks fell away to the ground, and the gates swung wide open. Without a sound, I followed her out of the city, until she came to a desolate wasteland strewn with garbage heaps, and entered a ruined hovel surmounted by a dome. I climbed up the roof and crouched over a chink in the ceiling. I saw her drawn near to a pitch-black, thick-lipped Negro. Yeah, they might be a little much. This isn't the most PC story, apparently. His skin was covered with sores, and he lay in tattered rags upon a mat of moldering reeds. Then I saw my wife, the daughter of my uncle, throw herself at his feet and kiss the ground before him. The Negro raised his head and growled, "Execrable bleep, why are you so late? All my black friends were in my house this evening, drinking and enjoying their women, but I could not share in their merriment because you were not here." "Master, flower of my heart," she answered, "have you forgotten that I am married to that cousin of mine, whom I detest with all my soul? Had you permitted me, I would long ago have leveled this city to the ground and scattered its stones as far as the mountain of Kaf. leaving only the cries of the owl and the raven to echo among its ruins. Foulest of the white, replied the slave, do you dare trifle with me? I swear by the honor and chivalry of my tribe that, if you fail me once more, I will cast you off and never lay my body over yours again. When I heard these exchanges and witnessed with my own eyes what passed between them, the world blackened before me. Then I saw my wife, the daughter of my uncle, weep and humble herself before the black slave, saying, Light of my eyes, treasure of my heart, I care for none but you. Do not send me away, I beg you. When at length her lover was pacified, she rose, unrobed herself, and stood before him quite naked. Then she said, My lord, have you no refreshment for your slave? In the pot, he replied, you will find a stew of rat's bones, and there is some barley water in the can which you may drink. As soon as she had finished her meal, she washed her hands and nestled close on his bed of filth. Seeing all this, I could control my rage no longer, and, jumping down from the roof, snatched the sword from my wife's belt and struck her lover through the neck. I might have to paraphrase some of these words. A loud gasp convulsed his body. Thinking that the blow had killed him, I rushed out of the house and ran straight to the palace, where I tucked myself in bed and lay still. By and by, my wife returned and lay down quietly beside me. The next day, I saw that my wife had cut off her tresses and dressed herself in deep mourning. Son of my uncle, she said, do not be angry with me for wearing these garments. I have just heard that my mother has died, that my father has lost his life in the holy war, that one of my brothers has been bitten to death by a serpent, and the other killed by the fall of a house. It is but right that I should weep and mourn. Dang, she just murdered off the whole family as an excuse, didn't she? Ain't no love lost there. Showing no sign of anger, I replied, do as you think fit. I shall not prevent you. She went into mourning for a whole year, and at the end of this time, she had a dome built in the grounds of the palace. She called it the House of Grief, and to this monument she had the Negro carried. For he was still alive, though crippled and bereft of speech, and no longer able to gratify his mistress's lust. He still drank deep, and every day, early and late, my wife took to him wine and stews and broths, and fell to wailing under the dome. All this I suffered patiently. One day, however, I entered upon her unawares, and found her weeping and beating her face in a most violent fashion. Unable to contain my fury, I drew my sword and was about to strike her, when she sprang to her feet, and, as it seemed, suddenly realizing that it was I who had wounded her lover, muttered some mysterious charm and cried, Now, powers of magic, let half his body be turned to stone, and little man be tucked in. At that moment, I became as you see me, neither alive nor dead. Then she bewitches my entire kingdom, turning its 4 islands into mountains with the lake in the midst, and transforming all my subjects, Muslim, Jews, Christians, and heathens, into fishes of 4 different colors. Nor was she satisfied with this, for every day she comes to torture me. She gives me 100 lashes with a leather thong and puts a shirt of haircloth upon my wounds, all over the living part of my body. When he had heard the young man's story, the king said to him, By Allah, your tale has added a heavy sorrow to my sorrows. But where is this enchantress now? But the Negro, cannot say that, in the monument, which you can see from the door of this hall, replied the youth. When she had drawn near, the king lifted his sword and thrust it into her breast, until the blade passed through to her back. Then he struck her down and chopped her body to pieces. Well, that's one way to deal with the, adulteress and sorceress. The king found the young man waiting for him at the palace gates. He congratulated him on his deliverance, and the youth kissed his hand and thanked him with all his heart. Then the king asked, Do you wish to stay in your own city, or will you return with me to my kingdom? Sir, replied the youth, do you know how far your kingdom is from here? Why, it is but 2.5 days' journey, answered the king. The young man laughed and said, If you are dreaming, your majesty, then you must wake. Know that you are at least a year's journey from your capital. If you came here in 2.5 days, That was because my kingdom was enchanted. But I will never leave you again, even for a moment." The king rejoiced and cried, "Praise be to Allah, who has brought us together. Henceforth you shall be my son, for I have not been blessed with an heir of my own." The king and the young man embraced one another and rejoiced exceedingly. Returning to the palace, the young king told his courtiers of his intention to set out on a long journey when all preparations were completed. The two kings set forth from the Black Islands, together with 50 slaves and 50 mules laden with priceless treasure. They journeyed for a whole year, and when at last they came in sight of the king's capital, the vizier and the troops, who had abandoned all hope of his return, went out to meet their master and gave him a tumultuous welcome. The king seated himself upon his throne in his own palace and, summoning the vizier and his other courtiers, recounted to them his adventures from beginning to end. Then he bestowed gifts on all who were present and said to the vizier, "Send for the fisherman who brought us the colored fishes." When the fisherman, who had been the means of delivering the enchanted city, was admitted to his presence, the king vested him with a robe of honor and questioned him about his manner of life and whether he had any children. The fisherman replied that he had one son and 2 daughters. The king took one of the daughters in marriage, and the young prince wedded the other. They really like keeping it in the family. And while the fisherman's son was appointed keeper of the royal treasury, the vizier became sultan of the Black Islands and departed thither with 50 slaves and robes of honor for all the courtiers of that kingdom. The king and the young prince lived happily ever afterwards. The fisherman became the richest man of his day, and his daughters were wives of kings till the end of their lives. Well, that's the end of that segment, and yeah, that definitely had some language in it. But I'm not sure if I will continue this or not. Let me know in the comments below if you still want to go through this book or not so much. I don't know that I'm particularly feeling this one, but hopefully you kind of maybe enjoyed that, and I will see you soon. Bye. Happy reading.